Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in our series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. I got into the carriage to be taken back to Hammersmith, and I got in with a bad heartache, and I got out with a worse heartache. At our own door I found little Jane Pocket, coming home from a little party escorted by her little lover. And I envied her little lover, in spite of his being subject to Flopson. Mr. Pocket was out lecturing, for he was a most delightful lecturer on domestic economy, and his treatises on the management of children and servants were considered the very best textbooks on those themes. But Mr. Pocket was at home and was in a little difficulty, on account of baby's having been accommodated with a needle case to keep him quiet during the unaccountable absence with a relative in the foot guards of Miller's. And more needles were missing than it could be regarded as quite wholesome for a patient of such tender years either to apply externally or to take as a tonic. Mr. Pocket being justly celebrated for giving most excellent practical advice, and for having a clear and sound perception of things, and a highly judicious mind. I had some notion in my heartache of begging him to accept my confidence, but happening to look up at Mrs. Pocket as she sat reading her book of dignities, after prescribing bed as a sovereign remedy for baby, I thought, well, no, I wouldn't. Chapter 34. As I had grown accustomed to my expectations, I had insensibly begun to notice their effect upon myself and those around me. Their influence on my own character I disguised from my recognition as much as possible, but I knew very well that it was not all good. I lived in a state of chronic uneasiness respecting my behavior to Joe. My conscience was not by any means comfortable about Biddy. When I woke up in the night, like Camilla, I used to think with the weariness on my spirits that I should have been happier and better if I had never seen Miss Havisham's face, and had risen to manhood content to be partners with Joe in the honest old forge. Many a time of an evening, when I sat alone looking at the fire, I thought, after all, there was no fire like the forge fire and the kitchen fire at home. Yet Estella was so inseparable from all my restlessness and disquiet of mind that I really fell into confusion as to the limits of my own part in its production. That is to say, supposing I had no expectations, and yet had had Estella to think of. I could not make out to my satisfaction that I should have done much better. Now, concerning the influence of my position on others, I was in no such difficulty, and so I perceived, though dimly enough perhaps, that it was not beneficial to anybody, and, above all, that it was not beneficial to Herbert. My lavish habits led his easy nature into expenses that he could not afford, corrupted with the simplicity of his life, and disturbed his peace with anxieties and regrets. I was not at all remorseful for having unwittingly set those other branches of Pocket family to the poor arts they practiced, because such littlenesses were their natural bent and would have been evoked by anybody else, if I had left them slumber. But Herbert was a very different case, and it often caused me to twinge to think that I had done him evil service in crowding his sparely furnished chambers with an incongruous upholstery work, and placing the canary-breasted Avenger at his disposal. So now, as an ineffable way, of making little ease great ease, I began to contract a quantity of debt. I could hardly begin, but Herbert must begin too. So he soon followed. At Startop's suggestion, we put ourselves down for election into a club called the Finches of the Grove, the object of which institution I have never divined, if it were not that the members should dine expensively once a fortnight, to quarrel among themselves as much as possible after dinner, and to cause 6 waiters to get drunk on the stairs. I know that these gratifying social ends were so invariably accomplished that Herbert and I understood nothing else to be referred to in the first standing toast of the society, which ran, Gentlemen, may the present promotion of good feeling ever reign predominant among the Finches of the Grove. The Finches spent their money foolishly. The hotel we dined at was in Covent Garden, and the first Finch I saw when I had the honor of joining the Grove was Bentley Drummer, at that time floundering about town in a cab of his own, and doing a great deal of damage to the posts at the street corners. Occasionally, he shot himself out of his equipage head foremost over the apron, and I saw him on one occasion deliver himself at the door of the Grove in this unintentional way, like Coles. But here I anticipate a little, for I was not a Finch, and could not be, according to the sacred laws of the society, until I came of age. In my confidence in my own resources, I would willingly have taken Herbert's expenses on myself, but Herbert was proud, and I could make no such proposal to him. So he got into difficulties in every direction, and continued to look about him. When we gradually fell into keeping late hours and late company, I noticed that he looked about him with a desponding eye at breakfast time, that he began to look about him more hopefully about midday, that he drooped when he came into dinner, that he seemed to descry capital in the distance rather clearly. After dinner, that he all but realized capital towards midnight, and that at about 2 o'clock in the morning he became so deeply despondent again as to talk of buying a rifle and going to America, with the general purpose of compelling buffaloes to make his fortune. I was usually at Hammersmith about half the week, and when I was at Hammersmith, I haunted Richmond, whereof separately by and by Herbert would often come to Hammersmith when I was there. And I think at those seasons his father would occasionally have some passing perception that the opening he was looking for had not appeared yet. But in the general tumbling up of the family, his tumbling out in life somewhere was a thing to transact itself somehow. In the meantime, Mr. Pocket grew grayer, and tried oftener to lift himself out of his perplexities by the hair, while Mrs. Pocket tripped up the family with her footstool, read her book of dignities, lost her pocket handkerchief, told us about her grandpa, and taught the young idea how to shoot, by shooting it into bed whenever it attracted her notice. As I am now generalizing a period of my life with the object of clearing my way before me, I can scarcely do so better than by at once completing the description of our usual manners and customs at Barnard's Inn. We spent as much money as we could, and got as little for it as people could make up their minds to give us. We were always more or less miserable, and most of our acquaintance were in the same condition. There was a gay fiction among us that we were constantly enjoying ourselves, and a skeleton truth that we never did. To the best of my belief, our case was in the last aspect a rather common one. Every morning, with an air ever new, Herbert went into the city to look about him. I often paid him a visit, in the dark back room in which he consorted with an ink jar, a hat peg, a coal box, a string box, an almanac, a desk, and stool, and a ruler, and I do not remember that I ever saw him do anything else but look about him. If we all did what we undertake to do as faithfully as Herbert did, we might live in a republic of the virtues. He had nothing else to do, poor fellow, except at a certain hour of every afternoon to go to Lloyd's, in observance of a ceremony of seeing his principal. I think. He never did anything else in connection with Lloyd's that I could find out, except come back again. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.